Dave, we're up to our eyeballs here in the holiday season.
Yeah.
We have a lot of our members will be celebrating Christmas this week. We've got New Year's coming up. Merry Christmas to everyone who's celebrating Christmas.
Yeah, it's been a lot of parties the last couple of weeks.
I was reminded the other day, I was reading through a bio of the famous actor Jimmy Stewart, who stars in one of the great, all-time classic Christmas movies, It's a Wonderful Life.
I thought you were going to say Die Hard.
Well, I told my wife last week, I've been sick, and now my wife's she doesn't have COVID, but she's been struggling with some bronchitis and it's nasty head cold. And so we were spending a lot of time watching TV, and I said, honey, this afternoon we're going to watch the two greatest Christmas movies ever back to back, Lethal Weapon and Die Hard. People forget Lethal Weapon. That actually came out the year before. It was my senior year in high school. And,
really?
And it's a Christmas movie. The whole thing starts with Christmas music. But a truly classic
Jimmy Stewart
and It's a Wonderful Life. And by the way, for those who there are still people who have not watched that movie. I highly recommend it. It is beautiful. It's truly beautiful. And it's not hokey and cheesy. There's there's a darkness to that movie. It's a suicidal husband, and that's what the whole movie revolves around. And when you know the backstory, that Christmas movie is even more beautiful. So Jimmy Stewart, he had just started his Hollywood career, and he was a pilot. He was a young pilot when World War II broke out. Mm-hmm. He wanted to go fight, and so he enlisted, and they knew this is a big time Hollywood actor. So they wanted him, the military wanted him putting on shows and things. And he said no. And this took a lot of finagling through the bureaucracy, but he ended up flying many dozens of missions dropping bombs over Germany. So he was a decorated combat pilot in World War II. He returns home after the war is over. He was really a broken soul. They didn't have a diagnosis of PTSD back then, but clearly he had this. He lost a bunch of weight. He couldn't focus. He couldn't sleep. He had these terrible recurring nightmares every night of planes exploding and men falling from the sky and this sort of thing. And really, he went downhill in a terrible way. And a few years later, he was offered the role of George Bailey in this movie, It's a Wonderful Life. And there are scenes in the movie where he's having a breakdown. And the character is suicidally depressed. God sends an angel down to show George Bailey what the world would be like if he had never lived. And you're seeing Jimmy Stewart. That's not just all acting. He was really struggling with demons. And of course, he went on to have this illustrious, fantastic movie career after that. But for those looking for something special to do, I just can't recommend highly enough. Rewatch It's a Wonderful Life.
But the important part is you got to watch all the way through. There's a very one of the more popular episodes of Friends. Mm-hmm. For those in my generation who grew up watching Friends and all that, right? Phoebe has never seen a bunch of movies, and Monica suggests to her she wants happy movies, right? And so Monica suggests It's a Wonderful Life. And she comes storming into the apartment one day. I can't believe you made me watch this. It's the word. It made me want to kill myself. It was so sad and I was so upset. And she says, but it ends so well. She says, well, does it? I couldn't even watch to the end. I had to turn it off.
You got to get to the end.
You got to get to the end.
That's right. That's right.
And we've had a couple of holiday parties, Christmas parties. Some of our chapters have put some on. Yeah. We had one for all of the Vino and Vertias Society members in the Denver metro area.
Mm-hmm. You and I also received some special little Christmas gifts. We
did.
Got some leather aprons from one of our members, sort of reminiscent of Ben Franklin and his leather apron club, which is very fitting. And we have kind of a special gift that we we're able to make available this the week of Christmas. This is kind of fitting to unveil our new gift, our new website.
Now, let's be honest. Truth is a precept of the Vino Vertias Society.
Yeah.
We didn't plan it this way.
No, we didn't.
It has been 8 months plus in development, but our new website launched this week.
That's right.
And so if you are watching this podcast,
that's right.
Unless you somehow came across it somewhere, I don't know where it is, or you don't know where it is, you are watching it on our brand new website. And we hope
it's fantastic. It really is. The new site it's a work of art. It's beautiful. It's very intuitive. And it's more than just a website. I almost feel like we're not giving it the credit that's due and the work that we've put into it. It's a whole new platform really for the next iteration of the Vino and Vertias Society. And there's a social community on there. There's all kinds of features. We want people to log in and check it out. We also, I'm going to throw this out as a little teaser. We have a really cool app that's in the works. It's not quite available yet, but it's going to be soon, which means people can carry us around on their cell phones. There's a terrifying thought, Dave. You and I are going to be in people's pockets.
However, I was thinking about this the other day. You and I, when we first started this, we had this dream, we had this hope that one day we could have an app that would not only be our content, but be a resource guide for things like access to the Declaration of Independence, things like access to the Constitution. And it struck me yesterday, we have those. For those who don't realize, in our commentary section, we have those documents. We're looking to continue to add to that over time. And now it's all in your pocket on your phone in an app. You don't have to go search the internet. If you want to find something in the Declaration of Independence, you don't have to go to Google and start searching. Just launch the Vino and Vertias Society app. We almost stumbled into that, and I didn't even plan it. Now I'm really excited about that.
It's a good point. And you're right. We are expanding. We're going to have a whole library full of important documents like the Declaration and the Constitution and other things, all of which are going to be, that app is going to be a portal into all the content that we have. So lots of exciting new developments. Since we're talking about things we've been working on, most of our members don't know this, but we've also been designing and building out some really great studio space. And we're creating a lot of new content in this studio space that we'll be able to publish in the coming weeks and months, and it's going to look great. It's going to sound great. We're taking the Vino and Vertias Society to the next level.
I'm not usually one to jump the gun, and I'm not usually one to say, I'm not a New Year's guy, right? Some people they love New Year's. New Year's is this huge thing to them. And I know we'll have another podcast or maybe even two before New Year's Eve. I've never been the let's make New Year's resolutions and things like that. If you want to get in shape, don't wait for New Year's to say I'm going to get in shape. Start getting in shape.
It's funny you mentioned that because I've been kind of a gym rat most of my life. I think I joined a gym for the first time when I was 13 or 14, freshman year of high school. So I've been in gyms for, 40 years. And you see the exact same phenomenon every year, early January, the gym is packed. And all you have to do is just wait a few weeks. And those numbers dwindle down. By March, it's the same group of people in the gym who were there before the New Year's.
Absolutely. So, like I said, I've never been the New Year's guy, but it just because of the timing of the new website, the new web platform, the new web experience, the app, the new studio, all of these things coming together right at the end of this year. It's been a rough couple of years for everybody, and 2020 and 2021 have been rough years, and I'm feeling more positive about a new year than I really ever have in my life. I think the things that we're going to do as a business are going to be incredible in 2022. I think the country has some big decisions to make in November of 2022, and I actually have a little confidence going into that. I think people are starting to feel like I can make decisions for myself. I can be self-reliant, and I want to live a little more freedom than the progressive kind of conversation is. You got to give up some freedom to let us, to make sure you're safe. And I think people are starting to push back. People are starting to say, yeah, I was willing to do that. But that's a whole other conversation. I was willing to do that. I think you've taken a little too much. And I think it's time we start talking about it. And that opens up a wonderful conversation that I'm looking forward to in next year.
I share your optimism, your hopefulness. I too, I really am looking forward to 2022, and I agree. These last 2 years, they've been brutal. I mean, there's been COVID, and then there were all the shutdowns and restrictions and everything that went along with that. I lost several really good friends in the last 2 years. It really has been tough. And I think many Americans, they're looking for some hope. They're looking for inspiration. They're tired of all the negativity. They want something good, something positive, something hopeful. And what's more positive and hopeful than the self-evident true ideas of human liberty and prosperity and flourishing. And that's what the Vino and Vertias Society is all about. That's what we have to offer to the world. We're talking about great presents here and gifts in this period of holidays. And the American founders gave this amazing gift to us. They gave us many gifts. They gave us a gift from many of them in their own examples. George Washington showed us how someone can conduct themselves when you need a great military, strategist and fighter and courageous soul, but also someone who will turn away from tyrannical power and support the cause of self-government. So we have these great examples. They helped us to understand these ideas that they enshrined in documents. We could discover those ideas on our own if we tried, but they made it easier for us. They gave us guides. They wrote these things down to help us. And they gave us a constitution, the likes of which has never been designed in human history. Mm-hmm. I'm the first to acknowledge anything created by human beings, including our own Constitution. It's not going to be perfect. Our Constitution isn't perfect. It's just really good. It's just better than any other Constitution that's ever been written by human hands before. We ended our last podcast. We were talking about that great line from Thomas Jefferson. This is in the Kentucky Resolution. So the context here was in the politics of the 1790s. George Washington is no longer president. John Adams is. The Federalists in Congress were passing some rather obnoxious policies, including the Alien and Sedition Acts, which was they were criminalizing.
Right.
If someone leveled legitimate complaints against their own government, Congress was trying to criminalize this. They were making it really difficult to become a citizen. And Madison and Jefferson both, respectively, they work with state legislatures and they create the Kentucky Resolutions. Virginia produces something similar. And these are basically complaints of federal policy. And in the Kentucky Resolutions, which is the one Jefferson writes, he basically is saying, we Americans, we should not be trusting these people in our own government. And we should bind them down with the chains of the Constitution. And he's saying that because he's saying, look at those people in Congress right now. In the 1790s, they're already doing things that they're not authorized to do according to the Constitution. And when you really think through what that means, it means the general premise that comes out of the founding. And I would argue this is not just the founders. This is an insight that any wise human being at any period of time, reflecting on human things, on the human condition, realizes that government is this very unusual, it's unlike any other kind of human institution because it is the monopoly on legalized force. Therefore, is more dangerous than any business, right? No business can legally command you or I to do anything. All it can do is offer us things. A church, so long as a church is not part of a government, all a church can do is say, hey, we offer these services or these kinds of worship. You're welcome to come join us. But it can't make you do something. Only a government can say, you're going to do this or we'll put you in jail or maybe even execute you.
Right. I mean, really look at that through history. Imagine imagine Adolf Hitler was not the head of the Nazi party and the head of Germany, the Führer, the leader. What if he was the CEO of the biggest business in Germany at the time?
Right.
And that business decided to start rounding up people he didn't like and executing them.
Right.
That wouldn't have lasted very long.
That's right.
But as the head of the government, who was going to stop him?
That's right.
Who had the power to do anything? And if you tried to, you were arrested for trying to murder a president. You were trying to.
That's right.
I mean, it's such a distinction.
It really, I mean, what it does is it illuminates, it shines a bright spotlight, metaphorically, on the concept of law and how important law is, how powerful the influence of law can be. The government is the only institution, the only organization making the laws, enforcing the laws. And that's what makes government power, unlike any other kind of power, any other kind of influence, is it's legalized force. They're enforcing their own laws, and they back it up with cops and armies and judges and prisons and execution chambers.
You know, and we've never really gotten into this, and I don't want to go down this whole rabbit hole today, but I think it's something important for people to think about. There's this real battle in America today over the perception of the police. You have some on the far. I'm not going to use the spectrum. You have some of the very progressive, the AOC types, those who are in that tribe, right? We've got tribalism in the United States very abundantly right now. That AOC, Rashida Tlaib, that tribe who want to totally defund the police and eliminate the police altogether, right? And they're sitting here talking about how bad cops are. You have some on the very, very, very extreme libertarian side who say police are bad. Police do bad things. We should change our entire police system. And you have people in another tribe who they wave their thin blue line flags everywhere they go, and it's all about supporting the police. I think a lot of those are people who are either pushing back on the Rashida Tlaib AOC defund the police movement, or they're people who know have relationships, personal relationships with police. I fall into that latter category. I have a lot of friends who are officers in different counties, particularly in Colorado, and some of them are very, very close friends. And I could speak a little bit on their behalf. They have gotten into this situation where they don't like what they're being asked to do either. Right? The government has gotten so big, and the government has overreached its power so much, they want to keep it to the proper limits. Yet they're the ones being told, this person isn't doing what we as progressives expect. You need to go into their business with guns and make sure they start complying. You have this huge problem now within the police forces. And it's a really interesting situation because these people love their jobs. You don't go become a cop to go become rich, right? You don't go become a cop because and different people have different reasons. But I know a lot of people who do it because they just want their families and their communities to be safe. And now they're being asked to do things that make them very, very uncomfortable.
What you just said, I see as kind of one side of a coin, and the other side, and it fits together to make this terrible problem. You are absolutely right that, well, we have all kinds of laws and regulations that shouldn't exist, but they do exist. And so who's going to enforce them? The police are the ones, they're the front line to enforce all these bad laws and bad regulations. So, one important reform I would like to see made that certainly affects policing, but it's not really directly aimed at the police, is scale back some of the laws, get rid of some of the unjust and intrusive controlling regulations, and then we don't have to expect the police to enforce them. The other side of this, here's a little piece of my career that some of our members may not know. I've done a fair amount of training for police units. I have trained a number of, so here in Colorado, which is it's similar in many states, right? We have county sheriffs who are elected positions under the Colorado state constitution. And then those sheriffs have deputies, right? People who work underneath the sheriff. But ultimately, they all, if you work in a sheriff's office, you report to the sheriff, and the sheriff is elected by the people of the county. And I've done training in a number of sheriff's departments. I've also done training for all the sheriffs. In fact, I remember kind of joking how I was a little nervous because I had all 60, I think we had 63, or there were 64 sheriffs, and I think we had 62 in a room, and I was leading a training session for them. Like, I've never been in a room with this many cops in my life. But one of the things I gave presentations on the core virtues that we have at the Vino and Vertias Society, what it means to be a good citizen, to be self-restrained and self-assertive in defense of your own rights, to have some civic knowledge, to know what you're responsible for, to know what government is supposed to do and not supposed to do, to be productive and be self-reliant. And I walked through this with law enforcement officers.
Sure.
They ate it up. And when we engaged in back and forth, one of the things they said is, and this is a different subject than the intrusive controlling regulations. They said, if we had citizens who behaved better, who were more virtuous, we wouldn't get so many calls late at night. Instead, right, you have citizens who are not self-restrained, and they get angry. They start beating up their wives, beating up their husbands, whatever it is. Somebody calls 911. Now, the police have to respond. They're supposed to respond. Now you have this situation where you have law enforcement coming into a situation very often that really should be handled by those citizens. They shouldn't be beating each other up. They should be self-restrained, right? They should be virtuous. They should, husbands and wives and boyfriends and girlfriends and others who just know each other, they shouldn't be trying to solve their differences violently. And if they were better citizens, there would be a lot fewer 911 calls being made to go out and investigate instances, allegations of domestic violence. And so, think of those two things. You put those two things together. Imagine a future United States where there are fewer bad laws, fewer intrusive controlling regulations. You got rid of this. And simultaneously, citizens were better.
Right.
Citizens were more virtuous, more self-restrained. How does that change that whole space of policing? I think it's a game changer.
Oh, entirely. I mean, and you're talking about like some of the awful violent things that people do to each other.
Yeah.
They're calling police for things that aren't even, they're things that it's absurd that they can't be self-reliant enough to just handle between neighbors. We were talking about this around a table with a group of friends the other night. We just had very high winds here in Colorado the other day that I hadn't seen since I lived in Florida going through hurricanes. I mean, that's as intense as those were.
Yeah.
And a lot of trees got blown over.
Yes.
And when those trees got blown over, some of those trees went through fences.
Yes.
And the fence might be one person's responsibility, and the tree was on their neighbor's side of the fence. And so they immediately say, your tree fell on my fence, you got to pay for it.
No.
And when the neighbor says, well, my tree was fine, I can't control it.
When there's 100-mile-an-hour winds, right?
I mean, this was not like an unhealthy tree, or I didn't chop it down and accidentally tilt it the other way.
Yep.
And all of a sudden they're calling the police, arguing over who should be responsible. That's not the job of the police. That's not the responsibility.
Right.
Be self-reliant, virtuous citizens. Sit down calmly, have a conversation, and work out a deal.
In my backyard, when my wife and I moved into our house, the fence, there was an old fence, and it had this weird, goofy curve in the fence. And the reason was there was a gigantic old tree right there. And so the people at some point just built the fence as the tree got bigger and bigger. They just moved the fence around the tree. And the tree was situated in such a way that part of it was on our property and part of it was on our neighbor. It was a really old, that tree had to have been there for a long time. And it was mostly dead. And it was huge. It was hanging way out into the alley. It was a disaster waiting to happen. And instead of suing people, instead of calling the police, instead of calling a regulator, my wife and I went over and sat down with our neighbor and talked about it. And She didn't like the tree. We didn't like the tree. We wanted to get a new fence. And so what we ended up doing was splitting the cost. Right. We went and had talked to some people. How much would it be to take this tree down and everything? And we split the cost and got rid of that liability.
But you know what? I'm gonna make an argument, because that's always the easy answer, right? We're gonna split it. But there are realities in the world. And one of those realities is sometimes people aren't in a position financially to be able to add that to their budget for that month. I bet you if you were in that position at that time and you went to your neighbor and said, look, we don't like the tree, you don't like the tree, we all want to get rid of the tree. I'm really not in a financial position right now to do it, but I'm willing to work something out where I can eventually catch up with you. And the neighbor wasn't in a financial position to handle it, or vice versa. You guys still would have been able to work something out. And I think too often the instinct is, well, let's split it. And somebody says, I can't, or doesn't want the other person to know that they can't. So they say, no, this is going to be your responsibility. I'm not doing it, because they don't want the other person. If you could just be honest with people, and if we could just be good neighbors and good communities and not have to turn to the government for help, that's where local help, person-to-person, peer-to-peer help, where you just, hey, you're my neighbor, we're friends, we get along well, it works out.
And that was what you just described perfectly, Dave, the premise of constitutional government and the kind of culture, the kind of society that revolves around a constitutional government that emerges from the American founding. The idea being government has one very narrow, very specific purpose, and it's not to come inspect our trees, or fix our fences, or fix our cars if they're not working, or inspect our food or medicines, or none of those things. Their job is to protect our rights, to make sure that our natural right to our life, our liberty, our free pursuit of happiness, that we're secure. If someone comes and tries to steal from us or hurt us, that's when government's supposed to step in and say, "Whoa, no, you don't get to assault people, you don't get to rape, you don't get to murder. Government's going to protect." And also people around the world. If you're a foreign government, no, you don't get to come attack Americans and drop bombs on them and kill them. We're going to stop you.
And as part of what you just said, government should be there. You actually talked about this last week, but the judicial system should be there to adjudicate when somebody got harmed.
That's right.
And was it proper? And you know, we're not talking about the tree falling, but or maybe we are, right? If that tree fell and didn't just break the fence but landed on me, if I was in my backyard and that tree fell, and then we've got all kinds of other conversations to have. Really, that person probably still isn't responsible if the tree was healthy and everything else. But that's neither here nor there.
Is there's a role for a civil justice system
in place of regulation. And that's the important part I wanted to get to, right? If you hire somebody to come build something on your house. I went a couple years ago, I went through helping to rebuild a deck on our house. And as we're rebuilding the deck, we used a screw that was not up to code. It was actually bigger than the screw that the code says we had to use. The inspector, we had to have an inspector come out. He would not approve the deck and said, you have to change this screw and you have to have 5 more in a baggie on hand available if any of the screws go bad. So we had a contractor was doing it and he replaced the screw and everything else. He used that screw because he thought it was more safe. And the inspector says, nope, you got to use the exact screw. If that deck had fallen and somebody was harmed, then we would have sued the contractor for not building it properly, right? And that's what the courts are there for.
Well, assuming the contractor was free to build it the way he wanted to.
That's my point.
And this is, well, somewhere there's here it is. There's a copy of my book, Save the Swamp. I have entire chapters on these themes in there, one of which that you just touched on. One of the results of regulation is it stifles innovation. Free human beings are always innovating. They're always trying to figure out, is there a better way to solve problems? Maybe we have certain technologies, certain methods that work, but there are always creative minds out there saying, can I do it better? Is there a way to make a better deck? Is there a way to make a better house, a better building, whatever it is, a better car?
Yep.
Once you introduce this notion of regulations and compliance, you are stopping, you're thwarting innovation. You're saying, no. We're not allowing you, Dave, or we're not allowing your contractor. I'm the regulator. I'm not allowing your contractor to build a better deck. He's going to build the deck according to the regulations.
Right.
And so it slows down innovation. Now, to build a better deck, you have to go through the whole process, which might end up taking years and huge amounts of money to get the regulators to change their regulation. The other thing it does, say your contractor, many good contractors out there, some not so good. Suppose your contractor does a bad job on the deck and it falls and somebody gets hurt. Like there's real damage done.
But I built it to code.
Bingo, right? This is another effect or another result of regulations. It actually shields businesses from accountability, from responsibility. They say, hey, it's not up to us. And sometimes these things happen on enormous scales. There was a movie made about the offshore drilling platform.
BP Oil?
BP Oil, Deepwater Horizon was the name of the rig. And it's also the name of the movie. It's a really good movie. It's got Mark Wahlberg in it. It's a great movie. And a very true story. And when that happened, I went back and dug up all the initial news reports, press conferences from BP Petroleum. And what they said was, it's not our fault. We were in compliance. Everything about the rig and drilling and the concrete and everything was what the regulator said we have to do. It shields them. It protects them from responsibility. And, I get asked this all the time, being in this realm of a critic of regulations. Ordinary Americans today, sort of, infected with the bug of progressivism. It's in their brain rattling around. They'll give me this puzzled look and they'll go, but Tom, what would we do if we didn't have regulations? Like it's almost unimaginable to, we gotta have, I can't even imagine a world without regulations. And the answer is tort law, the civil justice system you're talking about. Free people go do what they want. They build decks, they build houses, they do all kinds of things. And if someone does it poorly, if someone causes some kind of damage, you can be sued. And sometimes people get hurt. That's one of the dangers and risks of freedom. Occasionally bad things happen. People make mistakes. They do. But it's also the case when people are being held accountable. They got to make right their mistakes, or when they hurt people. That's a powerful teaching tool. It teaches everyone around watching. Wow, if I'm going to run a business, if I'm going to build a deck, I better be really careful how I design it and build it because I'm responsible.
Let's put that into context of 2021 and COVID.
Yeah.
Just recently, last couple of weeks, I want to say. The CDC has come out and said these two vaccine makers, so there's three general vaccine makers, right? Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson.
Yeah.
Those are the three big ones.
Yeah.
I unfortunately don't remember which one they singled out, but they said these two vaccines are good. This vaccine we don't recommend. Right?
Yeah.
So why don't you recommend it? Well, they're not telling us for 50 years. That was what we've been told, or 55 years.
Right.
But they said these two are good and this one, take it if that's the only one you can get, but we don't think it's as good. We don't recommend this. So now, if there are future problems, right? Let's say 10 years from now, there have been theories. We don't know what the long-term effects of these vaccines are going to be. Let's say there is a negative effect from the vaccine that washes over huge amounts of our population.
Right.
The two the CDC is endorsed, those two, and they get to court say, hey, CDC looked at this, the government looked at this, and they said, our vaccine is safe. You should take it. That third company suing them, I took that vaccine and I got sick. I'm having this problem. I'm having whatever it might be. There's going to be a class action lawsuit and they don't have the government protection to protect them. And it's based on who knows what? I mean, is it cronyism?
No, not who knows what, on who knows who.
Well, that's what I was saying. Is it cronyism?
Yeah,
Is it Fauci just liked one more than the other? Is it a couple of bureaucrats got placed on the boards of these companies, whereas didn't make it onto the boards of these companies? Is it kickbacks were different? I mean, who knows what the cause of them saying, and they haven't told us.
Right.
They have not said once, this vaccine might cause this, so you shouldn't take it. You should try to get one of these two.
I wrote a little piece on social media recently. I mean, it's no secret we are more divided as a nation than ever before. Right now, deep political divisions, cultural divisions, in all kinds of ways. And so I'm always trying to get my mind around these divisions. What is it that divides Americans? How do they think differently about things? One of those ways, just one, is you have a class of citizens, a large class, tens of millions of citizens, have this unwavering, unshakable, almost a religious-like faith that government bureaucrats do not pursue their own selfish interests. That they don't. That they're there in the government that their life, their being is all about looking after us, caring about us, right? They are altruistic beings who only care about other people and don't actually have self-interest. And therefore, we don't have to worry about them misusing the power that they have. We don't have to worry about Anthony Fauci using his position to enrich himself or his wife or his family or friends. So there's that group of citizens. And then there's the rest of us who just know better, right? We just know better. And, the way that you're describing here really focuses our attention on this. When someone, whether they're drilling an oil well in the Gulf of Mexico, or they're building a deck on the back of your house, or anything else, they're serving you food, or they're creating a vaccine, any kind of activity, what is the progressive fear? The progressive fear is, well, those are people. They're human beings. Mm-hmm. And some of them are kind of stupid. Some of them are kind of corrupt. Some of them are both. And we can't trust them. I mean, they might spill oil all over in the Gulf of Mexico, or they might make a vaccine that doesn't really work and makes people sick, or they might build a deck that falls down. We can't trust them because they're human beings. But then what's their solution? Their solution is, so we need these regulators to come, these bureaucrats. Well, what kind of beings are those? And it turns out they're the exact same beings with this one huge difference. They're not responsible for their own actions. So if a builder builds a bad deck and it collapses without regulations, that builder is responsible. He's on the hook. What happens when the regulator comes along and says, drill your oil well this way? Mm-hmm. And the oil company says, okay, and they do it that way. And the whole oil rig blows up and contaminates the Gulf of Mexico. Is that bureaucrat on the hook? No, the federal government has sovereign immunity. You can't actually sue the government. Right. And even if you could sue the government, that guy, the regulator, the bureau, he's not going to pay for the damages out of his bank account. You're suing. So even if you could sue the government, where's the government going to get its money? It's going to take it from us. Right. It's going to tax us, right, to pay for the damages that they caused.
Well, and so we know these bureaucrats, these regulators aren't altruistic. They're human beings. Mm-hmm. They have perverse interests just like the rest of us in certain circumstances. We have interests for all different variety of reasons, and we have to make decisions based on what our incentives really are. It does lead to this problem when government gets too big. As government starts to protect and fund some of these companies, right? Yep. They start to look to who is incentivizing them, where are their incentives coming from, who are they benefiting, and how's this all working out? And one of the things that's worried me lately, and I think has caused, and I can't remember if I've talked about this during a podcast. I know I've talked about it to some of our chapter members, and we've had some other conversations about it offline, but I'm getting nervous about the size of government in a world where we are having a growing global economy. Mm-hmm. We now have government funding huge swaths of companies, whether it's direct funding, whether it's tax incentives.
Well, here before you lay that picture out, let's just make sure our members kind of have an idea, have a view that they can see what it looked like under limited constitutional government. Under limited constitutional government, where government's just protecting rights. There's a criminal justice system.
Yep.
You don't get to murder and rape and steal. And there's a civil justice system. You got to live up to your contracts, right, and pay for damages you cause. Mm-hmm. There's a national defense organization. Sure. We're going to protect citizens against invading armies, right, coming over and dropping bombs on us. And otherwise, people are left free. In that kind of environment, someone starts a business, and let's say they don't treat their customers well, or they ignore their customers. They don't even care what their customers think. The customers quickly figure out, well, then I'm going to go give my business to somebody else, right? And that business that either hurt its customers or ignored its didn't pay attention to other people, that business probably doesn't stick around very long. People can vote with their dollars. Mm-hmm. In that kind of environment of freedom. They can vote with their dollars, which can be just as effective as voting with ballots. Choosing to spend $1 with this person and not spending $1 with this other person because I don't like this person, but I do like that person, yes. Right? That really matters. That has a big influence on how people treat others, how businesses treat others. But when you get into a big global kind of economy, mm-hmm. those incentives for the businesses start to change, and our government, big, massive, progressive subsidy state, really kind of fuels these huge international businesses in a way that probably wouldn't happen under a limited constitutional government.
Well, you talked about those incentives change, and I want to go through some different examples of just how much they change. We could start with the oil companies, right? If you don't like BP oil drilling in the Gulf, mm-hmm. if you don't think that the way that they're doing it is proper, if you don't think the way that they're doing it is safe, if you think they're damaging the environment, whatever it is, right? And I'm talking about all Americans.
Right.
You have the option of saying, okay, I'm not going to buy BP oil. I'm going to make sure I shop at Sinclair or mm-hmm. Conoco or whatever else it might be.
Right.
But if BP oil is drilling there and now they're selling in China and they're getting incentives from the government mm-hmm. to drill in the Gulf, our government, our tax dollars are incentivizing BP oil and they're funding BP oil, but their customer base isn't even here anymore.
Right.
And they're making money off of the Chinese, and the Chinese are saying, we want to hurt America, right? I mean, we know this. We know that the Chinese are actively saying, we want to hurt America. We want the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, to be the dominant government force in the world today. They want America to be hurt. Mm-hmm. So does BP all of a sudden start getting incentivized? If nobody's buying here but they can sell in China, do they become incentivized to intentionally create oil spills, to hurt America, to give us bad oil and bad gas because they don't need our money anymore? And the perfect example where we're getting to, and that is professional sports. In the NBA right now, the NBA, I have never seen a sports league so disliked among so many Americans.
Yeah.
There are at least 30 or 40% of Americans, and I'm throwing out a number, but at least 30 to 40% of Americans who just say, I'm not watching the NBA anymore.
Yep.
I don't like the product, or I don't like what they're advocating for. I don't like the political statements. I don't like LeBron James, or whatever it might be.
And most of those people, it's not that they don't like basketball.
Right.
They might go watch their local high school basketball, right? Or they watch March Madness and the college basketball. It's the NBA. It's the culture, the politics, the wokeness, the progressivism, the cocky attitudes, everything that goes with the NBA. Mm-hmm. You're right. Millions of Americans said, I'm out. I'm done.
And all of a sudden, still, basketball players are making more money than they ever did before. Basketball owners are making more money than they ever did before. And why? Because their product is the most popular sport in China today. Mm-hmm. So they are sitting here in American arenas that are built with our tax dollars. They are being incentivized by us. We are funding their arenas so that they can put on a product to sell to China.
Yep.
And yet nobody's doing anything about it. and we have no more control over it because government has so far exceeded its scope and what is its proper purpose.
So you're saying that the purpose of government, Dave, is not to build sports arenas? But how would people play sports if they didn't have government, built sports arenas?
And you know what's really interesting about it is I actually used to make the argument in favor of government-funded sports arenas, and not long ago, even though I believed in it. And I made the argument because I go back to sort of the Federalist model. And the Federalist model was competing for states should compete against each other, right?
Yep.
If you want people to move here, they move with their feet, they move their dollars with their feet.
Make it attractive.
The government's job in certain circumstances, the state government, not the federal government, the state government, part of their job is to make their state an attractive place for people to live.
Right.
And so part of that might be we want to get a team because that's something people started moving here. Colorado didn't have every sports team. Now they've got every team you could imagine.
Right.
Professional lacrosse and hockey and indoor football and whatever else you can think of. And it attracts more people to come here. And so I used to make the argument from a Federalist standpoint that government should be involved. But it's gotten to a point where it's not even for us anymore. That incentive is no longer an incentive for people. Having an NBA team for a lot of people isn't an incentive anymore. And yet we built this stadium.
So I say as a citizen, as just a person, a potential fan, I say I'm not interested in the NBA. I'm not going to buy any tickets to any games. I don't even want to watch it on TV. I don't want to support it. Now, if millions of other Americans shared that same view and made those same choices, that would actually hurt the NBA. The NBA would start paying attention to us. But instead what happens is government comes along and says, well, Cranowitter, we don't really care if you like the NBA or not. We're taking your money from you by force. We're going to tax you. And then they turn around and give money to the NBA, say, hey, we will build this multi-million-dollar, fantastic sports arena so that you, the NBA, you don't have to pay for it. We'll pay for this with Cranowitter's money and Rich's money, right? And millions of other citizens. They're going to pay for it. And so the NBA now doesn't even care if I don't like the NBA or you don't like. They literally don't care. They get to play basketball in their multi-million-dollar arena and have all high technology in there so that they can beam those games to China and have 1 billion people in China loving NBA basketball.
Right. And the NFL just recently, I guess, released a map of their new TV expansion into foreign countries, and they're going to start pushing this, and they're all doing it, and it's all being funded by us. It just shows the need today. I think under a global economy, the need becomes greater than ever to have a small government. Otherwise, you and I and our tax dollars are funding other companies, and we can talk about Facebook and Google and Amazon and all of these huge companies that have grown, and they're getting to participate in the regulatory process.
That's right.
And they don't care about Americans, so they're creating regulations, and they don't care because there's, 340 million Americans. There's probably about 170 million of them who are eligible to participate in those products, right? When you start filtering out kids and whatever else.
Right.
And there's over 1 billion people in China. There's over 1 billion people in India. We're insignificant. We're absolutely insignificant to them when they can start selling their products in those massive markets.
And let's be clear, if we were to scale back our government and have actually get back closer to the proper purpose of government, just protecting rights, protecting natural liberty and private property. That's it. The NBA would still be free. Those people in the NBA, if they want to go court business in China, in India, in any place, they could do it, but there would be this wrinkle. If they wanted to play in an arena, they would have to pay for their own arena. And to pay for their own arena, likely they would want to sell tickets, and which means they would likely be paying some attention to Americans more than if they can just cozy up with government, right? And get those crony subsidies. So for anyone who's listening, who's maybe scratching their head a little bit, wondering, well, are Tom and Dave suggesting that government should not be building sports arenas. Yes, we're very much saying that. Let private investors, private capitalists, if they want to build it because they think it's a good business model, knock yourself out, buy a piece of land and build it. But don't take money from me. And there's this other piece of it too. And you've talked about this. You know much more about this than I do. In every professional sports league, they strike deals with local governments, state governments, in some cases the federal government, where they create all these rules and regulations about competing leagues, competing teams. So you and I both love baseball, and we're sitting here in Denver, Colorado. There's a Major League Baseball team here, the Colorado Rockies. If you and I wanted to start our own team, it might be a foolish thing to do, but what if we wanted? What if we wanted to invest our capital and we're going to create a team and we're going to buy a plot of land and we're going to build a baseball stadium on it, right? And we're going to try to look for other teams to come play against our team. We would have to go beg permission from the Colorado Rockies, who likely would say no. And the reason we'd have to beg permission from them is they've struck deals with governments that make that impossible. If we were to start building a stadium without that permission, at some point we'd be arrested.
Right.
Arrested for building a baseball field
and trying to build a team. If we did create a team, even if we did it, and we built it, let's say we built it with no stands and no fans, and we found all the little ways around this, and we started a team, we wouldn't be allowed to go call the New York Yankees and say, "Hey, do you want to play a game this week?"
Right.
It's actually not allowed because they've been given rights to operate as a monopoly. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. Now, I do want to make clear though, I'm using sports as the example, but BP Oil and all these big tech companies and all these other international big businesses, they're all getting government benefits. And I want to go back to the BP example because this is really, really where this becomes the most important. So let's say we all stop shopping at BP the same way that we stopped watching the NBA or we're turning off the NFL.
Right.
And we stop shopping at BP. And BP starts saying, well, we've got to find a new customer base. India really wants to buy gasoline from us. And we're going to start selling, not even China, but India. And then India decides, you know what? Even if it's not intentional, BP has a massive oil spill. And BP severely damages the oceanfront property or the Gulf front property in the southeast United States.
Right.
We still can't sue them because they're protected by regulators.
Right.
I mean, this is why this becomes so important. We still can't hold BP Oil responsible for the oil spill because we did everything to code.
That's right.
The regulators told us that's why government has to be scaled back in a world of globalization
look at what
more than ever before.
And I want people just to reflect here as we wrap up. What that means, what you just said, is something really important. We can't sue the business because the business is shielded through the compliance. That's what the regulations and the compliance do, is it offers protection. They say, hey, that really wasn't our choice to drill that well that way. The regulator said we had to. So don't look at us, look at the regulators.
Right.
Okay, so you shift your attention to the regulators. You're going to sue the regulators? You can't sue the regulators because they're part of the government, and you can't sue your own government because of sovereign immunity. All these problems go away if you scale back the purpose of government, the powers of government. If you get rid of the regulations, get rid of the subsidies, which offer so many perverse incentives, let people just watch free people risk their own capital. Risk your own capital. And if it's a wise investment, you get to benefit. And if it's a foolish investment or just something bad happens, you lose. It speaks back to kind of come back to where we started this podcast. In the words of Jefferson, we should bind them down with the chains of the Constitution. Right. Our Constitution does not grant to government any power to be creating monopolies, to be creating regulations, to be giving subsidies to various business groups. None of that is in the Constitution. And the solution is to think of the Constitution as a bunch of chains that keeps these rascals from doing things they shouldn't do with our money.
And a little plug to finish up.
Yeah.
If you want to know what the Constitution does say,
yeah,
check out the commentary section of our new website.
It's a great.
The Constitution is right there, and you can read through it, and you can search, and you can can find it. And in the next sometime in 2022, we will do an entire course, an entire seminar.
That's right.
On understanding the Constitution, similar to how we've done on the Declaration. So we will make sure that all of our members actually have a real strong understanding of the Constitution.
It's part of what we do as guardians of the American idea.
And we will keep defending that every day. Nos Sumus Custodes.
Till next time.